The signal came on a Tuesday morning, breaking through the usual cosmic static like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog. At first, the technicians at Earth's Deep Space Listening Post 7 thought it was just another anomaly, something to log and forget. Tom Parker was on his 4th cup of coffee when the pattern caught his eye. Unlike the random bursts they usually picked up, this had structure. Definite, repeating patterns that couldn't be natural. "Hey, look at this," he called to his supervisor, Lisa Reed. She leaned over his shoulder, coffee mud frozen halfway to her lips. "Run it through the analysis again," she ordered, suddenly alert. The computers confirmed what they already suspected. This was no natural phenomenon. The signal repeated with mathematical precision, following prime number sequences, the universal language of intelligent life. "We need to call Director Wilson," Lisa said, her voice steady despite the excitement building in her chest. Within hours, the best code breakers and linguists on Earth were working on the mysterious signal. It took 3 days of non-stop work before Dr. Alan Moore made the breakthrough. "It's not just a hello," he announced to the crowded meeting room. "It's a cry for help." The message, once decoded, was simple but urgent. A fleet of alien ships was stranded at the edge of our solar system. Their engines had failed. Their life support systems were running on emergency power. They had nowhere else to turn. Director Wilson paced the length of the conference room, hands clasped behind his back. "How do we know this isn't a trap?" "We don't," Dr. Moore admitted. "But the math checks out. Their position is exactly where they claim to be. And our long-range scans have picked up objects that match their description." The world's leaders gathered in an emergency session. For the first time in human history, petty differences were set aside in the face of something much bigger. This wasn't just first contact. This was first contact with a civilization in desperate need. Tom found himself pulled from his regular duties and assigned to the response team. His experience with signal analysis made him valuable as they prepared to communicate back. "We're sending a message letting them know we received their distress call," Director Wilson told the assembled team. "Then we're sending help." The plan was simple. A small ship would make the journey to the edge of the solar system, carrying Earth's best engineers and scientists. They would assess the situation and determine if help was possible. Tom watched from mission control as the ship, named Hope, launched toward the stars. On board were 12 of humanity's brightest minds, including Lisa Reed, who had been selected for her unmatched problem-solving skills. "How long until they reach the alien fleet?" Tom asked one of the flight controllers. 5 days at top speed," came the reply. "We've never pushed our engines this hard before." For those 5 days, Earth held its breath. Every television and news feed focused on the mission. Children looked up at the night sky, wondering about the aliens waiting there. Adults debated what this would mean for humanity's future. On the 6th day, Hope sent back its first images of the alien fleet. The control room fell silent as the pictures appeared on the main screen. Thousands of massive ships hung in the darkness of space, their sleek designs unlike anything humans had built. They showed no lights, no signs of power, just enormous vessels drifting helplessly among the stars. "My God," someone whispered. "There must be millions of them on those ships." The radio crackled as Lisa's voice came through. "Mission Control, we've made visual contact with the fleet. They're beautiful. And they're dying. These ships are running out of power. We need to move fast." And just like that, humanity faced its greatest challenge yet, saving a civilization from the stars. The shuttle from Earth approached the massive alien flagship with cautious precision. Captain Jack Wilson guided the small craft alongside the enormous vessel, which dwarfed even Earth's largest space stations. "Look at the size of this thing," whispered Dr. Ben Adams, the xenobiologist. "It must be at least 3 miles long." The alien ship's outer hull showed signs of extensive travel, micro-meteor impacts and cosmic radiation damage that suggested decades, perhaps centuries, in deep space. What had once been a gleaming surface now appeared worn and faded. "They're opening some kind of docking bay," reported Lisa, monitoring the communications. "They're sending docking instructions." Jack maneuvered the shuttle according to the alien guidance. The bay doors slid open, revealing a cavernous interior space large enough to hold dozens of Earth vessels. As they passed through the atmospheric barrier, gravity suddenly took hold, pulling them gently downward. "They have artificial gravity technology," Dr. Adams noted, excitement evident in his voice. "That's far beyond what we've developed." The shuttle settled onto the landing platform with a soft thud. Through the viewport, they could see figures gathering. Tall, slender beings with smooth blue-gray skin and large, almond-shaped eyes that reflected light like polished silver. "Remember the protocol," Jack reminded everyone. "No sudden movements. Let them initiate physical contact." The team of 6 humans, 2 engineers, a linguist, Dr. Adams, Lisa, and Captain Wilson, prepared to exit. Each took a deep breath, aware they were about to become the first humans to meet an alien species face to face. As the airlock cycled open, they were surprised to find the atmosphere breathable, though slightly sweeter than Earth's. The alien beings stood in an orderly formation, with one figure slightly ahead of the others. The lead alien stepped forward and performed an elaborate gesture, touching its forehead, then heart, then extending both hands palms up. Dr. Maya Lin, the linguist, mimicked the gesture. "I believe this is a greeting," she whispered. The alien's mouth moved, producing sounds like flowing water and wind through trees. From a device on its belt came a mechanical voice, translating. "We welcome humans to the vessel Eternal Journey. I am First Navigator Toril. We are the Valen." "We come in peace," Maya replied slowly. "We received your distress signal." The aliens exchanged glances, their silver eyes reflecting uncertainty. "You have come to help?" Toril asked, the translator making the question sound stilted. "Yes," Jack confirmed. "We've brought engineers who might be able to assist with your propulsion systems." This caused a ripple of movement among the aliens. Toril's tall frame seemed to shrink slightly. "You believe you can repair what we cannot." The translator couldn't capture the emotion, but the alien's body language suggested disbelief. Mike Rogers, the lead engineer, stepped forward. "We won't know until we see the problem, but we'd like to try." Toril hesitated, then gestured for them to follow. The humans were led through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, passing hundreds of Valen who stopped to stare at the visitors from Earth. "How many of your people are aboard this fleet?" Dr. Adams asked. "This vessel carries 30,000, Toril replied. "The entire fleet holds approximately 5 million Valen." The humans exchanged shocked glances. 5 million lives depended on their help. They were brought to a vast chamber filled with what appeared to be engine components. Strange crystalline structures were connected to massive metal rings, all dark and silent. "Our quantum fold drives failed simultaneously across all ships," Toril explained. "We have tried for 3 cycles to restore them, but the technology was inherited." "Inherited?" Mike asked, already examining the machinery. "The Valen did not develop space travel," Toril said, silver eyes downcast. "We were uplifted by an ancient race who have long since departed. We maintained their ships, but never fully understood their operation." Mike ran his hand over one of the crystalline structures. "This might be simpler than it looks. The design principles aren't that different from our experimental drives." Toril's translator couldn't properly convey the sound that came from the alien, but it sounded remarkably like a scoff. "Your species has barely reached your own moon. How could you possibly understand technology that has carried us between stars for generations?" Jack stepped forward. "Because sometimes fresh eyes see solutions that others miss. That's why we're here, not because we're advanced, but because we're different." The alien considered this, silver eyes studying each human carefully. "Very well," Toril finally said. "We have nothing to lose." Mike Rogers stared at the alien engine room, his mind racing with possibilities. The massive quantum fold drive took up a space as large as a football field, with crystalline structures that pulsed faintly with remnant energy. Around him, a team of human engineers and Valen technicians watched anxiously. "I need to understand how this worked before it failed," Mike said, pulling out his tablet. "Can you show me the original schematics?" First Navigator Toril made a gesture that might have been the alien equivalent of embarrassment. "We have operational manuals, but no detailed schematics. The ancients who built these ships did not share all their knowledge with us." This revelation stunned the human team. The Valen had been using technology they didn't fully understand, like children driving a car without knowing how the engine worked. "You've been flying these ships for generations without knowing how they function?" asked Dr. Emma Wright, the quantum physicist. "We know how to operate them," defended Toril. "Maintenance procedures were passed down through the generations, but when all systems failed simultaneously, the alien's voice trailed off." Mike circled the central core, running his hand along the cold metal. "Something caused a cascading failure across your entire fleet. That's not coincidence." He knelt beside a panel and opened it, revealing a mess of crystalline circuitry that glowed with faint blue light. "Hand me the scanner, Emma." The scanner's readings confirmed his suspicions. These crystals are cracked at the molecular level. They're not conducting energy properly anymore. Toril leaned in, silver eyes reflecting the dim blue glow. "Can they be repaired?" "Not repaired," Mike said, "but maybe replaced." He looked up at the alien. "What are these crystals made of?" "Compressed stellar matter from a white dwarf star," Toril replied. "Impossible to recreate without access to such a star." The human engineers exchanged glances. Emma cleared her throat. "Actually, we might have an alternative. We've been experimenting with synthetic quantum crystals on Earth." Toril's translator crackled as the alien made a sound like rushing water. "Impossible. Your civilization is far too primitive to create such materials." Emma smiled. "With respect, Navigator, human technology developed along different paths than yours. While you inherited advanced technology, we had to build ours from scratch. We understand the fundamentals in ways you might not." She turned to Mike. "The crystals we developed for the Jupiter mission might work. They're not as efficient, but they conduct quantum energy in a similar way." "We'd need thousands," Mike said, calculating in his head. "We can fabricate them using the 3D molecular printers we brought," said Tom Lee, the materials engineer. "It would take time, but it's possible." Toril looked from one human to another, silver eyes wide with what might have been hope. "You truly believe you can do this?" Mike stood up, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. "We need to try something else too. These systems are failing because they're all connected in a network. When one ship experienced problems, it spread to the others." He sketched rapidly on his tablet. "We need to create isolation circuits for each ship, so a problem in one doesn't cascade to the others. It's like..." He paused, looking for a comparison the aliens might understand. "Like putting fire breaks in a forest to stop a wildfire from spreading." The Valen engineers gathered around, their silver eyes reflecting the tablet's glow as they watched Mike work. One of them, a younger Valen named Kiv, spoke up. "This approach is unconventional, but the theory appears sound," Kiv said, surprising both humans and Valen with this support. "I have studied the limited technical data we have. I believe the humans' idea could work." Toril made a gesture of acquiescence. "How long would such repairs take?" Mike looked at the enormous engine room, then at the faces of his fellow engineers. "With your help, and if we can get more supplies from Earth, maybe 3 weeks for the first ship. If that works, we can repair the others faster once we have a working model." Toril's translator couldn't quite capture the emotion in the alien's voice. 3 weeks. We have been stranded for over a year, attempting repairs without progress." Emma patted Mike on the shoulder. "That's because you've never worked with human engineers before. We specialize in the impossible." For the first time since they arrived, the humans saw what might have been a Valen smile. a slight upward turn of their thin lips. "Then let us begin," said Toril. 5 million lives are counting on your impossible skills." As engineers worked on repairing the alien fleet, Dr. Alex Foster found himself in what the Valen called the Hall of Remembrance. The circular room was filled with holographic displays showing the history of their species. Alex, an anthropologist specializing in cultural studies, had been assigned to learn about the Valen while the technical teams worked on their ships. "This is where we honor our journey," explained Mira, a Valen historian. Her slender blue-gray form moved gracefully between displays, silver eyes gleaming with pride. Alex watched as one hologram showed the Valen on their home planet, a world of vast oceans and floating cities. "You lived on water?" he asked. "We evolved from aquatic creatures," Mira confirmed. "Our cities floated on the surface of our world's great oceans. We never developed mining or heavy industry because we had no easy access to land resources." This explains so much. Alex made notes on his tablet. The Valen technological path had been fundamentally different from humanity's. Without easy access to metals and minerals, they had focused on biological technologies instead. "So how did you get into space?" Alex asked, genuinely curious. Mira touched a control, and the hologram shifted to show enormous ships descending from the sky. "The Guardians found us. They were an ancient race who traveled the stars searching for promising species. They chose us for our biological sciences and peaceful nature." The display showed Valen being taken aboard these ships, taught to use advanced technology. "They gave you everything?" Alex asked, trying to hide his surprise. "They uplifted us," Mira said with reverence. "They taught us to use their ships, their technology. We were to be their legacy as they faced extinction. And you never developed your own space technology after that?" Mira's head tilted in confusion. "Why would we? Theirs was perfect. We maintained what they gave us and focused on improving our biological sciences instead." The conversation was interrupted by a group of young Valen who entered the hall. They stopped and stared openly at Alex, their silver eyes wide with curiosity. "May we ask questions of the human?" one of them requested. Mira looked to Alex, who nodded with a smile. The young Valen surrounded him eagerly. "Is it true humans built machines before they understood physics?" one asked. "Is it true you fought wars against yourselves?" asked another. Alex laughed. "Yes to both. Humans have always been tinkerers and explorers, sometimes to our detriment. We built steam engines before we fully understood thermodynamics. We created medicines through trial and error before we understood biochemistry." The young Valen exchanged looks of astonishment. "This explains much," said Mira thoughtfully. "We've monitored Earth for centuries, but we never considered contacting you. Your approach seemed so chaotic, dangerous even." "We heard legends about humans," added one of the young Valen. "That you build without planning, that you learn through failure, that you fight against even the laws of nature." Alex couldn't help but laugh. "I suppose that's true in a way. Human progress has always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We experiment. We fail. We try again. But this is inefficient," Mira said, sounding genuinely puzzled. "Maybe," Alex admitted, "but it breeds innovation. When Mike and the other engineers look at your quantum drives, they don't see sacred technology that can't be changed. They see problems to solve, systems that can be improved." The conversation was interrupted by a call on Alex's communicator. It was Emma, excitement clear in her voice. "Alex, you need to see this. Mike's team just got one of the secondary power nodes working." Alex excused himself and hurried to the engine room. There he found a celebrating team of humans and a group of stunned Valen engineers. A section of the massive drive was now glowing with steady blue light. "How?" asked Toril, who seemed unable to believe what he was seeing. Mike pointed to a jury-rigged assembly where they had replaced the alien crystals with Earth-made alternatives. We bypassed the main control circuits and created a direct power channel. It's not elegant, but it works. Toril stared at the makeshift repair, then at the humans. For a moment, the translator was silent as the alien seemed at a loss for words. In 3 days, Toril finally said, "You've accomplished what we couldn't in a year." Alex looked at the mixed group, humans with their practical solutions and Valen with their perfect but inflexible knowledge. He realized they were witnessing the birth of something new. 2 radically different approaches to problem-solving coming together. "This is just the beginning," Alex said quietly. "Wait until we really start working together." Mike wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished connecting the last circuit. After 2 weeks of non-stop work, they had managed to restore power to 3 of the Valen ships. It wasn't enough to get them moving yet, but life support systems were now running at full capacity. "Hand me that spanner," he said to Kiv, the young Valen engineer who had become his shadow. The alien passed the tool with practiced ease, having quickly adapted to human engineering methods. "The energy flow is stable," Kiv reported, checking readings on a hybrid console they'd built by combining Valen and human technology. "Power output at 78% of original specifications." "Good enough for now," Mike nodded, closing the access panel. "Let's move to the next section." As they walked through the massive engine room, Mike noticed a cluster of Valen elders gathered near a sealed doorway he hadn't seen before. Their postures seemed tense, their silver eyes darting nervously. "What's happening over there?" Mike asked Kiv. The young Valen hesitated. "It is not something we discuss with outsiders." Mike frowned. After weeks of working together, the term outsider stung. "I thought we were past keeping secrets, Kiv. We can't help if we don't know everything." Before Kiv could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. Red lights pulsed along the corridors, and Valen crew members began rushing to stations. "What's going on?" Mike demanded, grabbing Kiv's arm. The young alien's silver eyes had widened to perfect circles. "Long-range sensors. They've detected something approaching." "Approaching? Like an asteroid?" "No," Kiv whispered. "Like the reason we fled our home system." Mike's communicator buzzed. It was Captain Wilson, his voice tight with urgency. "All human personnel, report to the command center immediately." The command center was in chaos when Mike arrived. The other humans were already there, standing in a tight group as Valen officers rushed around them. On the main view screen, a blinking dot moved steadily toward the fleet's position. "What's happening?" Mike asked Emma, who looked pale. "The Valen just told us why their ships really failed," she said quietly. "They didn't have an accident. They were attacked." First Navigator Toril approached the humans, his usual composure shattered. "We owe you an explanation," he said, silver eyes downcast. "Our fleet was not disabled by equipment failure. We were fleeing from the hunters." "Hunters?" Captain Wilson asked. Toril gestured to the view screen. "A predator species. They consider all technological civilizations their prey. They disabled our ships using an energy pulse that destroyed our quantum crystals, then left us to drift, knowing our life support would eventually fail." "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Dr. Foster demanded. "Because we were ashamed," admitted Toril, "and afraid you would abandon us if you knew the danger." Mike felt cold anger rising in his chest. "You put Earth at risk by not telling us. These hunters could follow us back home." "We believed they had given up the hunt," Toril said. "It has been over a year since the attack, but now they have returned to finish what they started." Captain Wilson stepped forward. "How long until they reach us?" 3 days, perhaps 4, replied a Valen officer. Mike exchanged glances with the other engineers. "That's not enough time to get these ships moving." "Then we need a new plan," Captain Wilson said firmly. "What do you know about these hunters? Their technology, their weaknesses?" Toril hesitated, then led them to the mysterious sealed door Mike had noticed earlier. Inside was a darkened chamber containing a single object, a twisted piece of metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. This is part of a hunter vessel, recovered after our last encounter, Toril explained. We have studied it but learned little. Their technology is unlike anything we have encountered. Mike approached the fragment cautiously. May I? Toril nodded, and Mike ran his scanner over the strange metal. The readings made him frown. This isn't just metal, he said slowly. It's some kind of composite material with unusual properties. He looked up at his fellow humans. But it's not magic. It's technology, and all technology has limitations. What are you suggesting? Toril asked. Mike straightened up, his face set with determination. The hunters disabled your ships because they knew exactly how they worked, but they've never encountered humans before. They don't know how we think. And how do humans think? Asked Kiv, who had followed them into the chamber. Mike smiled grimly. When cornered, we get creative and dangerous. He turned to Captain Wilson. Sir, I think it's time we showed the Valen how humans fight back. Wilson nodded, understanding in his eyes. Agreed. Let's turn these repair tools into weapons. Captain Wilson stood before the assembled team of humans and Valen, his expression grim but determined. The command center had been transformed into a war room, with diagrams and hastily drawn plans covering every available surface. We had less than 72 hours before the hunters arrive, he said, pointing to the main screen where a red dot moved steadily closer to their position. We need to be ready. Mike stepped forward, holding what looked like a modified welding tool. We've been repurposing our equipment into defensive systems. Emma, show them what we've done. Emma activated a holographic display showing the fleet's current formation. We've positioned the 3 ships with restored power in a triangular pattern around the others. Each one has been equipped with what we're calling pulse disruptors. What is a pulse disruptor? Asked Toril, silver eyes reflecting the blue glow of the hologram. Basically, we've reversed the polarity on your communication arrays, Mike explained. Instead of receiving signals, they'll broadcast an electromagnetic pulse that should interfere with any approaching vessels. Should? Toril questioned. This is experimental, Mike admitted, but based on what we've learned about the hunter vessel fragment, their systems might be vulnerable to this kind of disruption. The Valen Council members exchanged worried glances. One of the elders spoke up, his translator making his voice sound thin and reedy. This plan seems primitive. Lisa, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. With respect, it's primitive by necessity. We don't have time for anything elegant. But primitive doesn't mean ineffective. She pointed to another section of the display. We've also modified the cargo shuttles with magnetic grapples. If any hunter ships get past our first line of defense, we can attach to their hulls and deliver localized EMP charges directly. That would be a suicide mission, Kiv protested, looking alarmed. Not necessarily, Tom said. We've programmed the shuttles to operate remotely. No pilots required. Captain Wilson nodded. Our final line of defense is the fleet itself. We've managed to restore minimal maneuvering thrusters to 5 more ships. If the hunters break through, we can at least move the most vulnerable vessels behind those with power. The Valen Council fell silent, considering the plan. Finally, Toril spoke. You have accomplished in days what we would have spent months planning. But these measures seem desperate. They are desperate, Wilson acknowledged. But sometimes desperation breeds innovation. The meeting dispersed, with teams rushing to implement the final preparations. Mike found himself working alongside Kiv on the last of the pulse disruptors. I've never seen anything built so quickly, Kiv said, watching as Mike soldered connections without detailed blueprints or precise measurements. On our world, every project required extensive planning and approval. Mike smiled grimly. Humans have a saying, perfect is the enemy of good enough. Sometimes you don't need the perfect solution. You just need something that works right now. Kiv's silver eyes blinked slowly. This approach would have been considered reckless among my people, but I'm beginning to see its value. The alarm sounded before they could finish the conversation. Captain Wilson's voice came over the communication system. All personnel to battle stations. Hunter vessels detected on long-range scanners. Estimated arrival time: 4 hours. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Humans and Valen worked side by side, finalizing preparations that would normally take months. Equipment was tested, modified, and retested. Evacuation plans were established for the most vulnerable ships. 3 hours later, the first visual contact was made. The main view screen showed 3 sleek, dark vessels approaching the fleet. Their design was unlike anything the humans had seen before. Smooth, almost organic shapes that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. "They're scanning us," reported a Valen technician, her voice trembling slightly. "Pattern matches previous encounter." "Stand by pulse disruptors," ordered Captain Wilson. He turned to Toril. "We should broadcast a warning. Tell them to stay away." Toril shook his head. "The hunters do not communicate with prey. They never have." "Well, they've never met humans before," Wilson replied. He nodded to the communications officer. "Open a channel." The officer complied, and Wilson stepped forward. "Attention approaching vessels. This is Captain Jack Wilson of Earth. The fleet you are approaching is under our protection. Any hostile action will be met with immediate response. Change course now or face the consequences." Silence followed his message. On the screen, the hunter vessels continued their approach without slowing. "They're charging weapons," reported the sensor operator. "Same energy signature as the pulse that disabled our fleet before." Wilson's jaw tightened. "Activate pulse disruptors. All ships, prepare for impact." The improvised defense systems hummed to life, broadcasting waves of disruptive energy into space. On the view screen, the lead hunter vessel suddenly slowed, its smooth trajectory becoming erratic. "It's working," Mike exclaimed, watching the readings. "Their systems are struggling to compensate." For the first time since the humans had arrived, a sound like laughter came from the Valen crew. "Launch the remote shuttles," Wilson ordered. "Let's see if Phase 2 works as well." The battle unfolded like nothing anyone had ever seen. The hunter vessels, sleek and predatory, struggled against the unexpected human defenses. The pulse disruptors forced them to keep their distance, their normally precise movements now jerky and uncoordinated. "Remote Shuttle 1 has attached to the lead vessel," reported Lisa, eyes fixed on her console. "Deploying EMP charge now." On the view screen, a small flash of blue light erupted against the dark hull of the hunter ship. The effect was immediate. The vessel's lights flickered and died, leaving it drifting aimlessly in space. "It worked," Mike shouted, clapping Kiv on the shoulder. The young Valen's silver eyes were wide with amazement. "1 down, 2 to go," Captain Wilson said, his voice steady despite the tension. "Direct shuttles 2 and 3 to the remaining targets." The other hunter ships began evasive maneuvers, clearly recognizing the threat. One of them fired a pulse weapon toward the Valen fleet, but it dissipated harmlessly against the disruption field. "They're adapting," warned Emma. "The pulse disruptors won't hold them off much longer." Wilson nodded grimly. "Launch all remaining shuttles. We need to overwhelm them before they figure out a counter-strategy." A swarm of small craft shot out from the Valen ships, each controlled remotely by a human Valen team. They moved erratically, making them difficult targets as they closed in on the hunter vessels. One hunter ship managed to destroy 2 shuttles with precision shots, but 3 more attached to its hull, delivering their EMP charges simultaneously. The ship went dark, joining its companion in helpless drift. The final hunter vessel, seeing the fate of the others, suddenly changed course. Its engines flared brightly as it accelerated away from the fleet. "They're retreating," called out a Valen officer, disbelief evident in his voice. The command center erupted in cheers. Humans and Valen embraced without regard for protocol or cultural differences. Even Toril allowed himself a gesture that might have been the alien equivalent of a smile. "We did it," Mike said, hardly believing it himself. "We actually drove them off." As the celebration continued, Captain Wilson pulled Mike aside. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "That ship will report back. They'll return with more forces, better prepared." "Then we better make sure the Valen fleet is ready to move by then," Mike replied. "The repairs are coming along faster now that we have more power, and the Valen engineers are adopting our methods." Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "Speaking of the Valen, Toril has requested a private meeting with both of us. He says it's important. They found the first navigator in a quiet chamber away from the celebrations. The tall alien seemed unusually solemn, even for a Valen. "What you and your people have accomplished is unprecedented," Toril began. "In mere weeks, you repaired ships we thought lost forever. You devised defenses against an enemy we believed unbeatable. You have saved 5 million lives. We're glad we could help," Wilson replied simply. "But you have done more than help," Toril continued. "You have shown us a new way of thinking. For generations, the Valen have relied on the knowledge and technology given to us by the Guardians. We maintained their gifts, but we never truly understood them. We never innovated." "Different evolutionary paths," Mike said with a shrug. "Your people focused on biological sciences, harmony with your environment. Humans had to fight for everything." "Yes," Toril agreed. "And now we see the value in your approach." He hesitated, then continued. "The Valen Council has made a decision. We wish to continue our journey, seeking a new home far from the Hunter's territory. But we also wish to ask for volunteers from Earth to join us." Wilson blinked in surprise. "Volunteers? To leave Earth permanently? To become part of our community," Toril explained. "To teach us what cannot be learned from technical manuals, the human spirit of innovation, of improvisation. In return, we offer knowledge of the stars, of biological sciences far beyond your current understanding." Mike looked at Wilson, both men stunned by the offer. "We're not asking for an answer now," Toril said. "Return to Earth. Consult with your leaders. But know that this is not just about saving our fleet. This is about the future of both our peoples." As they left the meeting, Mike gazed out a viewport at the vast expanse of stars. "You know," he said slowly, "I might volunteer myself. There's something appealing about helping build something new out there." Wilson smiled. "I had the same thought. Can you imagine what humans and Valen might accomplish together? The technologies we could develop, the worlds we could discover." Behind them, the repaired Valen ships hummed with power, their lights shining bright against the darkness of space. What had begun as a desperate rescue mission had become something much more significant. The first step toward humanity's greater role among the stars. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as partners in a journey that would change both species forever.